Howdy, and welcome to the Texas Bucket List. My name is Shane McAuliffe. You know, Texas history has always fascinated me. For thousands of years, man has called this place home. But only for the last few hundred, it's been known as Texas. Once we became a state in 1845, everything changed, and quickly. Our expansion west is a documented story that you can learn a lot about at Fort Lancaster in Sheffield. Traveling west in Texas, it doesn't take long for things to start getting desolate. Just 240 miles from the Alamo City, you'll find Fort Lancaster. Here, the wind whips between the plateaus while every little thing fights for survival. That includes the westward travelers, who established this fort situated between the Texas Hill Country and the Chihuahuan Desert in 1855.
There's so many stories to tell with Fort Lancaster. I think that's one of the best parts about it.
David Martinez is the educator-interpreter for Fort Lancaster. Originally from the Rio Grande Valley, David is adjusting to life out on the frontier.
Been here a month and a half.
Month and a half, indeed.
What do you think of the gig?
Love it. In a way, it was sort of fulfilling of some of my childhood dreams living out west.
David has a master's degree in history, and his passion for this place is as expansive as the landscape.
Fort Lancaster is a very essential component of Texas history. This was a Federal Army installation at one point. The Camel Corps passed through here at one point. It was a former Confederate Army installation maintained by Confederate Texans. The Buffalo Soldiers were here, and it's the only site within the state of Texas that's a fort and simultaneously a battleground. Fort Lancaster has that unique distinction.
Expansion to the west came fast and furious for Texas prior to the Civil War, and that's how Fort Lancaster got its start.
Fort Lancaster was established in 1855 to protect the San Antonio to San Diego Trail. Mail coaches ran by through here, and it was also a military garrison to protect against the Native Americans in the region.
Around 1858, two companies of the 1st Infantry Regiment garrison with over 160 men were stationed here.
There were two sets of barracks here on site. There were the Company K barracks and the Company H barracks. It's a mixture of limestone brick and adobe, so that reflects in its condition today.
So this fireplace has been sitting here since 1860?
So this would have been completed around 1858.
1858. Wow.
Yes.
To think it stood the test of time for 166 years?
It has.
Wow.
Quite a while. And something that aided in its longevity is the fact that it was made out of limestone and not adobe. Had it been made out of adobe, like most of this building, it would have all been weathered away.
The fort was functioning just fine until a little skirmish between the North and the South took place in our country, leaving U.S. forces scrambling.
So in 1861, Texas joins the Confederacy, and Fort Lancaster receives the orders to evacuate. So March 20th is the official last day that U.S. troops were here at Fort Lancaster, and they actually marched on foot to the coast of Texas to Indianola, hoping to make their escape. But after 1861, Fort Lancaster never really achieves that same status of being a fully operational fort. Fort Lancaster had been abandoned in 1862 by Confederate Texans, and as an effort to reestablish the U.S. government's presence in the Southwest and Texas, the Buffalo Soldiers were part of that mission to bring the U.S. government back to West Texas.
So that was a really tough task for those guys, I'm sure.
Very, very, very tough. They had the odds stacked against them. However, it speaks to their tenacity, to the fact that they did so well in their mission, and they succeeded.
The only known attack on Fort Lancaster took place during the Buffalo Soldiers' time here, and they were greatly outnumbered.
It was 2 years after the Civil War ended in 1867, and a garrison of about 40 Buffalo Soldiers held their ground against a force of about 900 Kickapoo Indians.
Wow.
Quite the dramatic affair. This is where the peak of the battle occurred. And if there's one moment here in the Battle of Fort Lancaster that stands out, it's right here.
The corral that came under attack that day still stands.
The primary reason that the Kickapoo Indians attacked Fort Lancaster was actually for the horses that the Buffalo Soldiers, the cavalrymen, had brought with them here. You can imagine there's gunfire coming from the Company H barracks, there's gunfire coming here from the corral, and as the Buffalo Soldiers were trying to maintain and get control of the situation, the horses stampeded out that way. And the Kickapoo Indians gave chase, and that was perhaps a saving grace here at Fort Lancaster. William Frohawk, the captain of the Buffalo Soldiers, noted, had it not been for that stampede, all probably would have been lost for the soldiers here at Fort Lancaster.
In a world much different from the one we have today, just simply traveling west was a harrowing experience for families and for soldiers.
Fort Lancaster is also, in a way, hallowed ground because we have a cemetery here on post. We don't know the identities of all of these graves, but here at Fort Lancaster, we try our best to preserve this site to maintain the memory of the people who are buried here.
So these were not just soldiers that were here, these were people that were traveling through as well.
Exactly. Perhaps our most famous grave right here is Little Margaret, perhaps a young traveling child with her parents, and as they passed through here on their way out west, she was buried here at Fort Lancaster.
It's hard to imagine what those days were like.
It is. We have graves for soldiers that were here, for civilians, and even some unmarked graves. We're not too sure who's buried in there.
Well,
Taking some time to explore Fort Lancaster and trying to comprehend what life was like for those who defended it and those who traveled through it make this historical stop well worth a stop on the Texas bucket list.
The forts were a pretty important component of not just the United States history, but Texas as well. And Fort Lancaster, being a battleground, is a remnant of this interesting period of American history, makes it very much worth the visit.
Well, thanks for watching this segment of the Texas Bucket List. To see more, be sure you subscribe to our channel. And to see full episodes, become a member. In the meantime, you can also shop our store at the Texas Bucket List Store and Studio.